Have you ever sat down and spreadsheeted how healing versus damage mitigation versus enemy damage works? If yes, this video is for you. If no, I did it for you, and this video is also for you. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben U here for another Pathfinder 2e video, and today I want to think about tanking. So we're going to take a look at healing, damage mitigation, some other unusual ways of tanking, and compare all of that to enemy damage to see how effective these things actually are. This is something that I had been thinking about for a long time, and I decided to finally spreadsheet it all out, partially because I saw a Reddit post. The gist of it was, hey, we're going to be a party of mostly spellcasters. Are we going to be able to survive without a tank? And I think some of the numbers that I am going to provide today might be useful if you find yourself in that sort of scenario. You know, staying alive, kind of one of the most important things about succeeding in Pathfinder. Now, for this video, I am going to make two assumptions. Assumption number one, your character is level 6. I have chosen? I've chosen this level for two reasons. Number one, my current party is level 6, so it's a little selfish on my end. Makes all the math that I'm doing the most relevant to me. Number two, at level 6, you have your third level spell slots. You don't have master proficiency in things like medicine yet, and your third level spell slots aren't new. They've aged a little bit, so you're maxed out on your third level spell slots. So I'm trying to look at this both when your spells aren't maximally effective and when your skills aren't maximally effective. Note that due to some things heightening strangely, such as some kineticist abilities don't heighten every level, but every other level, if you do these calculations at a different level, you might end up getting some ever so slightly different results. Assumption number two, I'm going to assume that a Pathfinder character at level 6 has 75 HP. I had to pick a number to base all of my calculations around, and character HP can be really swingy depending on the character choices that you make, and I'm just going to show that off in a very simple way real quick. This is my bard. Let's zoom in a bit. For our purposes here, the only thing that I care about is this number right here. So my 6th level bard has 66 HP. Let's look at this random kineticist that I had as an NPC. This kineticist, who has Constitution as their primary attribute, as well as the Toughness feat, has a whopping 90 HP. So you could very easily end up with characters that have 60 HP or characters that have 90 HP, and you can do a lot of things to influence your HP, such as taking ancestry or heritage related options that increase the amount of HP that you are getting, a belt of good health. There's a lot of things that can impact your HP. So to make sure I don't drive myself crazy, I just picked 75 as a baseline number for how much HP a character might have. The 75 is a little better than a caster who maybe hasn't paid attention to their HP, but it's not like full on kineticist max con levels of tankiness either. So I'm going to do a couple of things today. I'm going to talk about effectiveness of healing, which I have in green here, the effectiveness of damage mitigation, and that's going to take up various slots from temporary HP to summoning things that can get in the way to reactions that reduce damage, and then I'm going to compare those to enemy damage, and we'll get a feel for how effective these various things are. Now, if you are a mobile user right now, RIP, all of this is not going to, be cleanly on your screen. So I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit for each one of these sections, make this a little more digestible, and I will link the spreadsheet down in the video description. So if you want to take a look at it, mess around with it, change it for your purposes, you are free to do so. Let's start by talking about some healing and the various healing things I have in green here. And we're going to take a look at specifically third level spell slots since we are 6th level characters. And we're going to take a look at trained and expert battle medicine here. So this is the amount that these things in theory heal, and these are the averages. And I'm going to look at these average healing amounts relative to our theoretical 75 HP character. So when we are thinking about healing and tanking and keeping people alive, we can see that heal is just often going to be the best thing at doing so as far as healing goes. There's a good reason why it is the bar. And a 2-action heal with no extra juice on it of any kind is going to heal your character for about half of their health from the look of things. And there are other things that you can do to increase the amount that you are healing. You can be a cleric, for example, and take the healing hands feat, and that will increase the amount of healing that you do by a little bit and make it so that you are getting a slightly higher proportion of those totals. I have done healing hands as an example here to show you that the difference when you add a little bit of extra sauce onto these isn't that much. The healing hands feat, for example, is just healing 3 extra HP or 4% of a character's life total here. Not that big of a deal. So I'm not going to sit here and go like, oh, okay, well, I am a sorcerer and I can add this. I'm not going to do that for every single option. It doesn't make that much of a difference as far as the math is concerned. Now, heal is not on every spell list, and you might not have access to heal. If you are a spellcaster looking to keep your various friends alive, you might have access to the Soothe spell, which on average is going to heal 28.5 as opposed to 42.5. This is still a beefy chunk of healing, and we can compare that to the battle medicine in just a second. Like a 2-action 3rd level Soothe, that's still very, very good. You can't set heal as the baseline for this is what healing should look like, because heal is going to be, at the top of the tier list as far as healing abilities go. So I think it might be more useful to compare something like Soothe to something like Battle Medicine. And we have the numbers for a trained success, a trained crit, an expert success, and an expert crit here. So these are these 4, and obviously they go up as we go on. So as far as a 3-action a 3rd level Soothe goes, a 3rd level Soothe and a crit on Battle Medicine are approximately the same thing. You might not have thought, hey, my Battle Medicine can be as good as a 3rd level spell slot, but it actually can. Like, it performs just barely, barely, barely worse than Soothe. Now, more realistically, is your 6th level character going to crit on their battle medicine check? You might need to roll like a 15 or a 16 on the die in order to crit on an expert battle medicine check. If you are, say, a cleric with high wisdom, you may or may not have an item that boosts your medicine at that level. So it's certainly possible. And you can, if you want, run the exact numbers for, okay, with my exact wisdom score and medicine stat, where exactly am I going to fall on this as far as averages go? You can get more into the weeds of that if you want. There is always more math to do if you want to like optimize and understand things better. But this isn't the battle medicine video. This is the tanking video. So we're going to go ahead and move on. And then I've thrown in a couple other common sources of healing, such as Lay on Hands, a wonderful, relatively accessible focus spell, and the Kineticist's Ocean's Balm. Notably here, in terms of thinking about how good Ocean's Balm is about the same as a 1-action heal, which is often said to be an inefficient use of your heal spell, given how much more you get out of the 2-action heal. Like, you are just adding 24 flat healing onto that. This is the difference between doing about 20% and about 50% of a character's life total as healing. You don't always need to do the 2-action. Sometimes you're just trying to, keep someone topped off or something like that. Sometimes you don't have the action economy to do a bigger one, but these are just kind of things to keep in mind here. So it's No surprise that actions, and especially these higher level spell slots that are meant to be used for healing, are very good at healing. Whereas some of the things that are incredibly accessible to all characters aren't necessarily going to have the same output. If you are, the heal font cleric and you have access to at least four of these a day, you can do a really good job of keeping people up. Whereas conceptually, your battle medicine might not really be your intended way to really heal people when the danger is on. This might be topping people off, a good third action. This might be you popping people up once they have gone down. And now we've got some perspective on the numbers as far as what percentage of the character's health these things are actually capable of doing. Now, the battle medicine numbers are a little low. I want it to be known that there are ways to really help out with the battle medicine stuff. The Godless Healing feat, the Robust Health feat, and the Medic Dedication can vastly swing how potent your battle medicine can be. So feel free to rerun the numbers if you want and see the impact of those feats, as they can be rather substantial. Note, though, that some of those things do come with downsides. The Godless Healing and Mortal Healing lines, for example, those sorts of things get shut off once you have been healed by divine magic in a day. So now I want to talk about things like damage mitigation, alternative ways of tanking, putting other things in the way of the strikes so that you don't take them. And I want to root these in reality by comparing their effectiveness to the healing that we just saw. So let's kind of use this like 18 or 19 here as a good ballpark. So, as far as one action goes, if you're doing like 18 or 19 points of healing, that's solid. We can see that with a heal that is done over two actions, you're getting about 20 points of healing per action. And that is lining up with how much these do per action, although there is a very large difference between giving 20 HP to one person and 40 HP to one person. So thinking about it in terms of raw efficiency isn't really the most useful, and we'll get into that viewpoint a little bit later when we start looking at enemy damage. So the first thing that I want to do is talk about temporary HP. There's lots of sources of temporary HP in the game, but they are often small amounts of temporary HP at the same time. Think your cup implement from the Thaumaturge, or spells like False Vitality and Rousing Splash. Now, Rousing Splash is a cantrip, and if you had a really powerful cantrip that was able to give you a ton of HP, temporary HP every turn, that would probably be overpowered. So, how does Rousing Splash's output compare to the output of these other things? Trained success on battle medicine was 9 HP healed. Rousing Splash is on average 7.5 temporary HP. The Rousing Splash is worse than a trained success on battle medicine. So, in terms of in combat use of Rousing Splash, maybe don't. Now, if you're about to open a door to a dangerous room, yeah, hit some people up with Rousing Splash, and that will be great. Similarly, would you like to cast an in combat False Vitality for 13 temporary hit points? No, probably not. When you think about 13 HP spread over two actions, like that's not really where you want to be. Notably, some of these numbers are quite low, despite being attached to good abilities. So, for example, the Champion and Thaumaturge both have access to reactions that give someone resistance to damage equal to 2 plus their level, meaning 8 at this level. And that can save a character about 10% of their health in any given turn. That 10%, that 0.11, doesn't really sound impressive relative to these other numbers. That's like a trained success on a battle medicine. But these are reactions that cost no expanded resource. This doesn't cost a spell slot. Battle Medicine can only be used on each character once a day unless you are taking some follow-up feats to make it better. And if you use your champion reaction 4 times over the course of an encounter, it's not 0.11 anymore. You're not getting a tenth every time. Over the course of an encounter, you are adding, 40% of a player's life total to the cumulative life pool that you have for that encounter. And that's why things like the champion reaction end up being so strong. They're not eating away at any resource, they are reusable, and you can just kind of keep going forever with them. There are some other ways to mitigate damage other than just raw resistance, and the spell protector tree is one of the best things that does that. And this one I think is important enough that it gets its own little section. Protector tree is kind of a cracked spell. So 30-foot range, you make a tree. At first level, it's 10 AC, 10 hit points. And those hit points scale up by 10 each level, so it's going to be 30 HP at the current level with third level spell slots. So whenever an adjacent ally is hit by a strike, the tree gets in the way and takes the damage first. Any damage beyond what it takes to blow up the tree goes to the original target. And the tree doesn't really impede movement through its space. Notably, this does not cost you your reaction. This does not cost you a hypothetical tree reaction. This is just something that happens. And this tree stays there. You can kind of take cover around it, so to speak, and have it eat up some damage from the strike-based damage that is coming. This is something that you can kind of set up proactively before the damage happens, and so this is different than healing. When healing happens, the damage happens first, and you heal afterwards. With Protector Tree, you can throw the tree out before the damage even happens, and it's still gonna work. Unless some weird movement-based things happen, or unless, it's just gonna breathe fire and kill everything anyway, there's some issues with Protector Tree. Generally speaking, it is a very good spell. Notably, kineticists have a first-level feat called Timber Sentinel that allows them to cast a heightened Protector Tree at will. With no resource, not an overflow trait, their aura stays open. So a kineticist, or hypothetically, someone with a kineticist dedication and a single kineticist feat, can spam a Protector Tree at will. And this is incredibly strong based on the math that I had up before. So at the level range that we're talking about, a Protector Tree has 30 HP, which is about 40% of a character's life total. So as far as that 0.4 goes, that is outperforming a third level Soothe, that's not beating Heal, that is outperforming ever so slightly a crit on Battle Medicine, and this is something that does not expend any of your daily resources. So if you are in an incredibly deadly campaign and you want a way to really stretch out your HP in an encounter, spamming Protector Tree is a very good way to do that. Is that going to be a fun way to do that for anyone involved? I don't really know about that. If your turn is just Protector Tree and strike every time, I don't feel like you are going to enjoy playing the game very much, and I don't feel like your character is very dynamic, but throwing it out there, it's a really strong option. Now, at the same time, if you have the option to cast Protector Tree, or say a 2-action heal with your primal spell slot, for example, mathematically speaking, it might be better for you to just cast a heal, depending on how much damage your target has already taken. And I want to talk about summoning spells now. I think summoning spells have a much worse reputation than they should have because people are coming from the D&D mindset. So, story time now. I played a warlock in a roughly level 5 to 20 D&D campaign where we were all playing magical girls. And I focused on summoning spells throughout that campaign, and it just kind of felt cracked. I just felt like I had so much more action economy than everyone else. I had such wonderful options available to me, The things that was summoning had relatively good defenses, chances to hit, and all of that stuff. And the summoning spells felt borderline too good at times. And Pathfinder kind of changed the math on the summoning spells and made them into what I think are still good and reasonable spells, as long as you are not trying to view them as I am summoning a baby fighter, I am summoning a baby barbarian. You should instead view summoning spells as additional HP pools, as distractions, as ways to gain flanking, as ways to add utility that you might be missing to a fight. And if you think of summoning spells as denying actions, either because they literally stop enemies from doing something, they cause status effects that keep enemies from hitting, the enemies target them, or maybe even move to them and hit them rather than hitting you, the summoning spells still end up looking really good in those scenarios. So let's say you are a bard who has Summon Fey, because that's something that I'm currently doing with my character. You might summon a Leprechaun, which has 25 HP. Now, compared to your 75 HP character, that is something that is kind of squishy, but it might survive a hit from an enemy. It is a third of a character's health, and when we get into the math of how much damage the strikes are actually realistically going to do, it might end up living through a hit. And if it does so, great. That's a hit that did not actually go to any of your party members. But many times, the summon Fey spells have some sort of cool utility associated with them that might deny more action economy. So, for example, if we're using the Leprechaun here, the Leprechaun is able to cast Illusory Object. And it does so at a DC of 20 rather than 18 due to a special ability that it has. So, an enemy at that level relatively easily will pass that DC 20 disbelief check, and they will know that whatever your Leprechaun did, whether it's put them in a box, put them in a ring of fire, put a pit in the way, they will know that that thing is not real. However, if they waste an action to disbelieve, and they waste an action to go and try to kill your Leprechaun, and maybe they don't kill it then, so they use a third action, well, then your third level spell slot has wasted 3 actions of the enemy. And when we think of things like slow as being good, well, your little Leprechaun from Summon Fey might outperform a slow in terms of how much it adds to a fight. And in a fight that I was just in, I cast Summon Leprechaun, I did Illusory Object, I got a whole bunch of wolves, they were lower level enemies, trapped in a ring of fire that wasn't really there, and I think I had 5 different wolves have to do a disbelieve check to figure out that the fire was not there, and I gained an incredible amount of action economy by doing so, and if those strikes never happen, that is sort of like effective healing. Now, you can summon other creatures with more HP. So for example, I also have Summon Undead on my character. I don't know how to pronounce this one. Draugr? Question mark. Well, you can summon one of these little friends that have 35 HP rather than 25, and then that is starting to get close to half of a character worth an HP. While your Summon Fey might live through a hit, this one almost certainly will. And if you are trying to maximize just purely on the raw amount of HP that you can put onto the battlefield, with a 3rd level spell slot and Summon Undead, you can summon a Zombie Brute, which has a whopping 70 HP. Now, I am going to put a little asterisk next to this because I don't think it is really fair to just say, hey, you can summon something that has more HP than you, because a Zombie Brute does have weakness to slashing 10 and weakness to vitality 10. So when you know that, something is about to walk up to you and punch you and do bludgeoning damage, you might get a lot of mileage out of your Zombie Brute, but if something is coming in swinging a sword, like rip Zombie Brute, that giant amount of HP isn't actually going to seem that giant. And as a side note, This is a great example of why recall knowledge is so good. If you know that that enemy has a giant weakness like that, and you can exploit that, an enemy goes from being very, very scary to a lot less scary quickly. Now, another thing that you can do, and this is going to require a few feats, it is probably going to require a free archetype table, is you can take the Beastmaster archetype. And with a Beastmaster archetype, you can dump another character onto the board that has 60 or so HP. 62 is the amount that my animated leg chair has that I am using on my bard. And that is about 83% of a character's HP pool on the battlefield. With these summon spells, it is a little important to note that they are going to probably have a lower AC than many of your characters. So they might get whomped, they might get crit on sometimes, but they are still going to be denying those actions. And I guess at that point, why don't we go ahead and start pivoting into the damage itself? Okay, if we are going to think about how we are going to go about figuring out how much damage various creatures are going to do, I recommend checking out the Building Creatures page. There is a ton of information and a bunch of tables here about what their stats look like. And specifically, we are going to be using the strike damage table that is a little bit further down on this page. And this is going to tell us what it looks like at various degrees of damage for what the damage output should be for various levels of creature. So I have included 3 different types of creatures here. So we're level 6. I have included a 3rd level creature that just has moderate strike damage. These might be something that are like the smaller adds in a fight. I have included an on-level creature with high strike damage. And then I have included a level +2 creature with high strike damage. So we can kind of see what you might call the mooks, the adds in a fight. The things that are, a relatively reasonable threat. And the things that might be some sort of like boss or lieutenant or general in a fight. And this is probably where we need to zoom out and put these numbers into context here. So a lower level enemy that just hits you is going to hit you for about 15% of your health. And that is going to be less than something like a one action heal or an ocean's balm, or on par with something like a battle medicine. So, from lower level enemies, it is very, very easy to mitigate that damage. So, if we take something like a heal, which is going to do, roughly 50% of our health, we might be offsetting 3 or 4 moderate strikes that are just regular hits from a lower level enemy. Whereas when we start talking about an on level enemy, that heal might be offsetting 2 strikes or 1 crit. So, whereas you can go a couple of turns, maybe being swarmed by some lower level enemies and eat that damage, and then, like, boop, 2 action heal saves everything, going toe to toe with an enemy that is at or above your strength, you are going to need to use that healing a lot sooner. And something like a battle medicine might realistically heal you from a couple of moderate strikes from an enemy. But when we start looking at like the expert level success and the expert level of crits here, the expert level success keeps up with the strike from an on level creature, but the expert level crit is actually slightly less than the enemy crit. And when we start looking at the enemies that are actually higher than you, the things that might be a single target boss, or maybe, you might have a level 8 enemy with a couple of adds in, your healing doesn't keep up. So the higher level enemies are likely to crit on you and hit you for about 60% of your life pool. And even the cleric that has healing hands is going to struggle to keep up with that, especially when you consider that an enemy that is a higher level than you might crit you on the first time and then hit you on the second time, meaning that it takes out about 90% of your health pool in a single turn. And this is the point where it's probably useful to sort this entire thing by output to see, hey, where is it that all of these various things fall relative to each other? And I think a good number to keep in mind for how effective these things are is the strike from an on level enemy, this 0.24. So we can go ahead and we can sort this, and let's start by looking at that 0.24, that high strike damage from an on level creature. We can see that this is on par with, say, an expert battle medicine, a lay on hands, or a crit on a trained battle medicine. All of this stuff is kind of effectively in the same range. But your one action heals, your sources of temporary HPs, your reactions aren't necessarily going to mitigate all of the damage that you see here. And I think one of the areas where a champion or a thaumaturge reaction or anything similar might thrive is against a group of lower level enemies. If you are fighting a bunch of lower level enemies, some goblins, some wolves, something like that, and there's a large number of them, you might almost entirely negate the damage that they do. So if they are hitting you for 10.5 damage, let's just call it 10. If they're hitting you for 10 and you soak up 8 of that, only 2 of that damage is actually going through into your real HP pool. So these things that can mitigate damage matter so much against all of these smaller hits. Whereas when you compare them to something like high strike damage from, the level 8 character or the crit damage from the level 6 character, the amount that you are mitigating still matters, but you're still taking a whomping to your HP pool from those higher hits. So let's go back to something like the Summon Leprechaun for a second here, or the Summon Draugr, however I pronounce that. So those might have 25 or 35 HP. Assuming no crit or a crit from a lower level enemy, your summon spells are in theory going to go and live through a hit. Or if you were going to use a third level spell slot on a wooden double, let's say hypothetically you are an oracle that has a bunch of focus spells or something, and you are just going to go like, boop, I have a bunch of other resources, so I can use an actual spell slot on this. That is going to be a fine use. It will probably mitigate the entire hit most of the time, unless a chonkier enemy is actually going and critting on you. And we should go back to the Kineticist and the Timber Sentinel feat for a second here, because the Timber Sentinel allows you, for 2 actions, to mitigate 30 damage worth of strikes. And that is probably going to be more than 1 strike negated by that. And as far as action economy goes, if you trade 2 of your own actions or 1 of an enemy's actions, especially in these solo fights, that is something that is positive for you. The enemy only has 3 actions overall, if there's one of them. They are maybe not going to use all 3 for combat, for like damage oriented things. They might need to move or reposition or something. And so if you take away one of those actions with a summon fey, a protector tree, or something like that, that is incredibly good damage mitigation. Notably here, a level +2 enemy that goes and crits on you is going to outpace all of the various healing that you are capable of doing, unless you are really stacking the odds in your favor. So the 3rd level 2 action heal is going to heal you for about 40. The strike is going to deal you 44. You can't quite keep up with that, and this costs you a daily resource, whereas the enemy striking is costing them no resources. So especially in a prolonged adventuring day, you can't necessarily just keep up with this. The returns that you get on the Beastmaster archetype are really high. Like the Beastmaster archetype is adding 62 HP to the board, which is more than a heal with healing hands, more than 2 protector trees worth of value. And the creature that you create here is something that can also be healed, be saved. You can use reactions on it. You can use protector tree on it. Now, it is a pain in the butt if your animal companion dies. I believe it raw takes you a week of downtime to replace. Although I think Donsbury Days is kind and gives it to you like the next not the next encounter. I think the next long rest or something like that. But it is a loss if you do lose your animal companion. I don't want to prattle on for too much longer, but just kind of using this to inform some build decisions here. If you are just doing something like lightly splashing a medicine training into your build, you should not expect your battle medicine to be the burst healing that you need to get through fights. If you kind of look at where these red bars are and you look at where the battle medicine stuff is, it can keep up with some stuff, but it is not going to be above the higher damage output potential of creatures, especially if they take more than one strike action in a turn. You know, they have something like Draconic Frenzy that is just like, I'm hitting everybody up in here. Similarly, when you are thinking about spell slots and the effectiveness of spells in those slots, if you have the ability to cast like Protector Tree and Wooden Double and False Vitality and heal or summon undead, you might want to think how these numbers stack up against each other. You know, I am kind of spreadsheeting these things in a vacuum here. You can do further breakdowns if you want. Like, okay, how likely is this zombie brute actually going to be crit on by an on-level monster versus an above-level monster versus a low-level monster? And, you know, you're probably going to see that this 70 HP is not just like the most optimal thing in the world once you start doing that. But in terms of raw HP that you are adding to the map, this can sometimes be a very strong option. Especially if you have something like a hallway that you can just like, boop, plug it with the zombie brute. The enemies take a turn or two getting through it while your spellcasters, pew, 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 just kind of do all of their magic-y stuff. Or you get set up with all of your support options and then you go through and do your fight. Now, if you have the ability to abuse some of the better things on this list, you can increase their effectiveness. So, for example, if you can stack up some number of these bonuses together and you move this 18 from battle medicine up to a 23, you go from not keeping up with a couple of these categories to keeping up with a couple of these categories. And the difference between something like 18 and 23 might not seem like it matters, but a difference of 3 HP could really matter. Let's take this level 6 crit example here. So if you are dealing 36 to something twice, that is 72 damage. Your 75 HP character remains up from that. So a difference of a couple of HP can really be the difference between your character going down and not. So increasing the effectiveness of some of the things here might matter more than it looks. The math in this system is really tight. There's not that many things that let you just add big numbers to stuff. So if you can get a +5 to healing from Godless Healing or Robust Health or Medic Dedication, or even a +10 from a Medic Dedication on your Expert check, that can matter a lot. So the Battle Medicine here, success, going up to a 29, that is a massive difference. But again, when you use a feat to get better at something, you are not using that feat to get better at something else. So just decide how much you are investing in healing based on your party's needs. And I think with that, why don't we go ahead and jump into our conclusion here? Okay, so let's look at the numbers one last time here. So I said for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that, our character has 75 HP. But you could think about the kineticist that just has 90 HP instead. And you can see that your kineticist with 90 HP might barely live through 2 crits on average, whereas your 75 HP character is probably not going to live through 2 crits. And you can start taking things like armor class into consideration as well. I'm just going to kind of assume that things hit here. So having more HP is good. Having more AC is good. Having more healing is good. But you can do all sorts of other things to help mitigate damage. And if you have some persistent source of damage mitigation from a reaction, from a kineticist spamming protector tree, by summoning things that are getting in the way and eating up actions, you can probably tilt the scales of combat in your favor. And people are probably thinking, well, okay, well now that I've seen all of this, how do I break it? How do I game the system? What are some silly things that I can do here in order to tilt the scales in my favor? And obviously, Kineticist Dedication, which just requires +2 con into Protector Tree, is a very easy way to kind of help break the favor of combat. That's not a good way to say that. To turn the tide of combat in your favor. But I think that's kind of boring. So if you want some more interesting things to try out, consider a summoner. Summoner gets an Eidolon, or Eidolon, if you want to care about the omega at the end of that word and make it a long vowel. And you can go and have that Eidolon have battle medicine with the skilled partner. Yeah, with the skilled partner feat. And you could end up with an Eidolon that can battle medicine itself, and you can battle medicine your Eidolon, and your Eidolon can battle medicine you, and you can end up with a character capable of using battle medicine a large number of times. And if you can, beyond that, invest in some things that give you additional healing from battle medicine, like, say, the Godless Healing feat, you can really crank up the amount that battle medicine can heal over time, and you could play a spellcaster that ends up tanking because you have some number of spell slots that could be used for heal or soothe. You have some number of spell slots that could be used for protector tree. Heck, you could take a kineticist dedication on your summoner and end up with a summoner who sends out the Eidolon, summons a tree friend for the Eidolon, and then battle medicines, and is all sorts of a pain in the butt to cleave through. Now, one other thing that I didn't get into in terms of damage mitigation was shields and shield block. That is another rabbit hole to go down. You can mitigate a decent amount of damage by raising your shield and then shield blocking, but that starts to get into your treasure budget and what hardness shield do you have, and do you have a reinforcing rune for that shield? And I decided that was beyond the scope of a video. Maybe we will explore shields a little bit more another day, but that is another good way to mitigate damage. And off the top of my head, I'm guessing that the shield reactions end up being around Thaumaturge reaction or champion reaction levels of damage mitigation. Although, maybe we'll get into the math some other day. Alright folks, that's all I've had. I hope you enjoyed this short little video, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day as well. See ya!